In the heart of Texas, where dust devils dance across endless plains and the sun beats down without mercy, there's a story that defies everything we think we know about courage. Jake Morrison was a legend in the rodeo circuit, a cowboy who could ride any bull that entered the arena. But 8 seconds changed everything. One violent throw, one shattering impact, and Jake's world went dark. The doctor said he'd never walk again. His family's ranch, passed down through 4 generations, now teeters on the edge of bankruptcy. The bank wants their land. Time is running out. But Jake has one last card to play, one impossible chance to save everything he loves. He's going to climb back onto the very beast that destroyed his life. Thunder, the 2,000-pound bull with eyes like black diamonds and a reputation for ending careers. Some call it madness. Others call it suicide. Jake calls it redemption. This is the story of a man who refused to stay down, a family that refused to give up, and a ride that would change everything. The Morrison Ranch had stood for 97 years, weathering droughts, depressions, and the slow march of time that turned thriving cattle operations into memories. Jake Morrison grew up in the shadow of his grandfather's legacy, learning to rope before he could write his name, riding horses before he mastered a bicycle. The ranch spread across 300 acres of Texas hill country, where bluebonnets bloomed in spring and the creek ran silver under summer moons. His father, Thomas Morrison, had worked himself into an early grave trying to keep the operation profitable, leaving Jake to shoulder the burden at 25. But Jake had other dreams burning in his chest. The rodeo called to him with a siren song he couldn't ignore. By the time he turned 30, Jake Morrison was a name that made crowds roar. He'd won 3 state championships, placed in nationals twice, and earned enough prize money to keep the ranch running while his mother, Elena, managed the day-to-day operations. His younger sister, Sarah, had just finished veterinary school and planned to return home to help modernize their breeding program. Everything seemed possible. The Morrison Ranch would survive. The family would thrive. Jake would ride until his body gave out, then settle down to run the place properly. That was before Thunder entered his life. The bull arrived at the Houston Rodeo with a reputation that preceded him like a storm front. Bred from champion stock, standing 6 feet at the shoulder, Thunder had thrown every single rider who'd attempted him. 18 consecutive buck-offs. The prize for riding Thunder had climbed to $50,000, money that could clear the ranch's mounting debts and give them breathing room. Jake's agent warned him against it. His mother begged him to reconsider. Sarah told him it was reckless. But Jake saw only opportunity, only the chance to secure everything his family needed. The night of the ride, the arena packed with 12,000 screaming fans, Jake lowered himself onto Thunder's broad back. He could feel the animal's muscles coiling beneath him, could sense the raw power waiting to explode. The gate swung open. For 6 seconds, Jake rode perfectly, his free hand high, his body moving with the rhythm of organized chaos. Then Thunder twisted in a way no bull should twist, combining a spin with a reverse that defied physics. Jake flew through the air like a rag doll. He remembered the lights of the arena spinning, the taste of dust, and then nothing. He woke 3 days later in a hospital room with his mother's tear-stained face hovering above him. The words the neurologist spoke sounded like they came from underwater. Severe spinal trauma. Permanent paralysis from the waist down. Physical therapy would help him adapt, but walking again was impossible. His rodeo career was over. His life as he knew it had ended in 8 seconds. Jake spent the next 6 months in rehabilitation, learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair, struggling with phantom pains and the suffocating weight of depression. He watched his savings evaporate into medical bills. He watched his mother age 10 years in 6 months. He watched Sarah postpone her dreams to help manage the ranch that was slowly dying. 18 months after the accident, the Morrison Ranch was bleeding out. The cattle market had collapsed just as they needed it most. 2 consecutive drought years had decimated their grazing lands. The bank, once friendly and patient, now sent letters with increasing frequency and decreasing sympathy. Elena Morrison worked herself to exhaustion, but at 68, her body couldn't keep up with the demands of running a cattle operation. Sarah had taken a job at a clinic in town to bring in steady income, working dawn to dusk at the ranch, then pulling evening shifts treating other people's animals. Jake felt like a ghost haunting his own life, wheeling through rooms that once echoed with his footsteps, watching his family sacrifice everything while he sat useless. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when Martin Fletcher from First National Bank arrived unannounced. He sat at the kitchen table where 4 generations of Morrisons had shared meals, spread papers across the warm wood, and delivered the news with practiced sympathy. The ranch was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The bank had been patient, but patience had limits. They had 60 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure. The number he quoted might as well have been $1 million. They had no way to raise $85,000 in 2 months. Fletcher suggested they consider selling while they could still negotiate terms, before the bank was forced to auction the property. After Fletcher left, the kitchen filled with terrible silence. Elena sat with her head in her hands. Sarah stared at the papers as if she could change the numbers through sheer will. Jake felt rage building in his chest, the first strong emotion he'd felt in months besides despair. This land had Morrison blood in every acre. His grandfather had cleared rocks and built fences with his own hands. His father had died young from the stress of keeping it alive. Now they were supposed to just walk away. Let some developer turn it into a housing subdivision? Let strangers build their dreams on top of Morrison ghosts? That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He wheeled himself out onto the porch where he'd spent countless evenings watching storms roll in from the west. The stars blazed overhead, indifferent to human suffering, beautiful in their coldness. He thought about Thunder, wondered if the bull still toured the rodeo circuit, still threw rider after rider. He'd heard through the grapevine that Thunder's prize had climbed to $100,000. No one could ride him. The bull had become a legend, a mythical creature that couldn't be conquered. Jake found himself laughing at the bitter irony. The solution to all their problems was locked inside 8 seconds on the back of the animal that had destroyed him. The idea took root slowly, growing from impossible to merely insane. What if he could ride again? Not walk, not run, but ride. His upper body had grown stronger than ever through physical therapy and wheelchair athletics. His core, despite the paralysis, maintained some stability. Modern medicine had advanced. He'd read about adaptive sports, about paralyzed athletes accomplishing incredible feats. Could someone ride a bull from a wheelchair? Of course not. But could someone with paralysis ride a bull with proper support? The question consumed him. He spent the next week researching, contacting spinal injury specialists, talking to adaptive sports coaches, learning about equipment and possibilities. Everyone told him it was impossible. That word had lost its power to stop him. Jake's plan emerged slowly, built from desperation and stubborn hope. He contacted Marcus Rivara, a biomechanical engineer who specialized in adaptive equipment for extreme sports. Marcus had helped paralyzed athletes ski, surf, and rock climb. Could he help someone ride a bull? Marcus was skeptical but intrigued. They met at the ranch, and Jake laid out his situation with brutal honesty. He needed to ride Thunder for 8 seconds. That ride was worth $100,000, enough to save the ranch with money left over. He had 60 days to prepare. Marcus stared at him like he proposed flying to the moon using a slingshot, but Marcus didn't say no. He said maybe. He explained the challenges. Bulls generated forces that would tear a normal rider apart. Someone with paralysis lacked the lower body control that provided crucial stability. However, there were possibilities. a specialized harness system that could be concealed under traditional riding clothes, rigid supports that could lock the hips and knees in optimal positions, training protocols that could strengthen Jake's upper body and core to superhuman levels. It would be dangerous. It might not work, but it wasn't impossible. The word impossible officially died that afternoon. Elena Morrison exploded when Jake told her his plan. She'd already lost her husband to this ranch. She'd already watched her son's body broken by rodeo dreams. Now he wanted to climb back on the bull that had paralyzed him? Was he trying to kill himself? Was he trying to destroy what little peace she'd managed to find? Sarah was quieter, but equally opposed. She'd researched spinal injuries extensively during Jake's recovery. She understood the risks. Another fall could kill him. Even if it didn't, the trauma could worsen his condition, leave him dependent on a ventilator, or cause complications that would make his current paralysis seem mild. Jake let them vent their fear and anger. Then he showed them the bank's foreclosure notice. He asked them what alternative they had. Sarah suggested selling part of the land to developers. Jake explained that selling pieces wouldn't generate enough to save the whole. Elena proposed taking out personal loans. Jake walked them through their credit situation and debt ratios. Every conventional solution led to the same place: losing the ranch. His plan was insane, but it was the only plan that offered real hope. He would train carefully. He would work with the best people. He would stack every possible advantage in his favor. But he was doing this. The only question was whether they would support him or fight him. The family meeting stretched past midnight. Sarah crunched numbers, calculated risks, researched precedents. Elena sat silent, wrestling with a choice no mother should face. Finally, as dawn light began touching the eastern hills, Elena spoke. Her voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. If Jake was determined to do this, then they would help him do it right. No half measures, no shortcuts. They would find the best trainers, the best equipment, the best medical support. They would prepare as if their lives depended on it, because they did. Sarah nodded her agreement, her face set with grim determination. They were Morrisons. They didn't quit. They didn't surrender. If this was their last stand, they would make it count. The next day, Jake called Marcus and told him to start building the equipment. He contacted Tommy Chun, a legendary bull riding coach who trained 3 world champions. Tommy initially refused, calling the plan suicidal. Jake sent him video of his physical therapy progress, medical reports, and a detailed training proposal. Tommy called back a week later. He'd consulted with doctors and engineers. The plan was still crazy, but crazy didn't mean impossible. Tommy had one condition. Jake had the promise that if at any point the risks became too extreme, he would walk away. Jake promised, knowing it was a lie. He couldn't walk anywhere, and he wasn't walking away from this. Training began with an intensity that would have broken most people. Jake started each day at 4 in the morning, working with a physical therapist who specialized in spinal injury cases. They focused on building his upper body to peak condition, strengthening his core, and developing balanced strategies that compensated for his paralysis. By 6, he was in the gym, working with Tommy Chun on a specialized mechanical bull that Marcus had modified to simulate Thunder's movements. The machine was brutal, programmed with data from Thunder's previous rides, replicating the bull's signature moves with mechanical precision. Marcus arrived at the ranch with equipment that looked like science fiction. The harness system was a masterpiece of engineering, using lightweight carbon fiber and titanium to create rigid support structures that could be hidden under traditional riding clothes. The design locked Jake's hips and knees in optimal riding position while allowing his upper body complete freedom of movement. Small hydraulic dampers absorbed shock and prevented the catastrophic twisting that had injured him before. The entire system weighed only 12 pounds, but could withstand forces that would crumple steel. Marcus had even designed a quick-release mechanism that would separate Jake from the bull if he was thrown, preventing dragging injuries. But technology was only part of the solution. Jake had to relearn how to ride from scratch, adapting techniques developed over centuries to his unique situation. Tommy Chun proved to be a brutal taskmaster, pushing Jake past what seemed like human limits. They worked on hand strength, training Jake to maintain his grip through forces that would tear normal riders loose. They developed upper body positioning that maximized stability while allowing split-second adjustments. They practiced falling, teaching Jake how to protect himself if things went wrong. Every day brought new bruises, new pains, new doubts. Every day Jake pushed through them. News of Jake's plan leaked out slowly, spreading through the tight-knit rodeo community like wildfire. Reactions ranged from supportive to scathing. Some riders called him an inspiration, a warrior refusing to stay down. Others called him reckless, accused him of cheapening the sport, suggested he was having some kind of mental breakdown. The Rodeo Commission held emergency meetings to discuss whether they could allow a paralyzed rider to compete. Medical ethicists debated on sports programs. Insurance companies panicked. But Jake had researched the rules carefully. Nothing in the regulations specifically prohibited riders with disabilities. If he could pass the same physical requirements as any other rider, they couldn't legally stop him. Sarah threw herself into supporting Jake's preparation, applying her veterinary knowledge to study Thunder's behavior patterns. She obtained video of every one of Thunder's rides, analyzing the bull's movements frame by frame, looking for patterns that might give Jake an advantage. She discovered that Thunder always started his routine with a hard right spin, then reversed direction in the third second. Most riders expected a linear progression of difficulty, but Thunder escalated randomly, saving his most violent moves for seconds 5 and 6 when riders were already exhausted. Understanding this pattern might give Jake precious milliseconds to prepare for what was coming. Elena contributed by managing the ranch's deteriorating situation while Jake trained. She negotiated with the bank for extensions, sold off equipment and livestock they could spare, and stretched every dollar until it screamed. She watched her son push himself to the breaking point day after day, watched him fall off the mechanical bull dozens of times, watched him climb back on with grim determination. She didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night, kept going on coffee and willpower, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. The weight of watching her family's legacy circle the drain while her paralyzed son prepared to risk his life on an impossible gamble aged her in ways that years never had. As the deadline approached, Jake's progress was remarkable but uncertain. He could now ride the mechanical bull's Thunder simulation for the full 8 seconds about 60% of the time. But a mechanical bull, no matter how sophisticated, couldn't replicate the intelligence and unpredictability of a living animal. Thunder wasn't just strong, he was smart. The bull seemed to sense weaknesses, adapting his strategy to exploit each rider's vulnerabilities. How would Thunder react to Jake's unusual riding style? Would the bull sense the paralysis and find ways to exploit it? These questions haunted Jake's dreams and fueled his waking hours. The Houston Rodeo agreed to let Jake attempt Thunder on the final night of the season, a decision that generated more publicity than any event in the rodeo's history. News crews arrived from across the country. Disability rights advocates held rallies outside the venue. Medical professionals published op-eds warning of the dangers. Betting markets went insane with speculation. Jake Morrison became a lightning rod for debates about courage versus recklessness, inspiration versus exploitation, human potential versus human limitations. Through it all, Jake focused on one thing: 8 seconds. The week before the ride, Jake's medical team conducted final evaluations. Dr. Sarah Gutierrez, a spinal specialist who'd been consulted throughout the training process, delivered her assessment with clinical precision. Jake's upper body strength tested in the 98th percentile. His cardiovascular fitness was exceptional, but she couldn't hide her concerns. The forces he would experience on Thunder's back could cause additional spinal damage. There was a non-trivial risk of catastrophic injury or death. She'd cleared him to ride from a medical standpoint, but she made him sign acknowledgments that spelled out every terrible possibility in legal language that made Elena weep. The night before the ride, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on the ranch's porch one last time, watching stars wheel overhead, thinking about everything that had led him to this moment. His grandfather had bought this land with rodeo winnings back in 1928. His father had died at 52 from a heart attack while fixing fence in the summer heat. Now Jake was betting everything on 8 seconds aboard a bull that had already destroyed him once. The poetry of it wasn't lost on him. He thought about calling the whole thing off, about finding another way, about accepting defeat. Then he thought about developers bulldozing the house where 4 generations had been born. That thought burned away his doubts. The Morrison family arrived at the Houston Rodeo Arena 4 hours before Jake's scheduled ride. Security escorted them through crowds that pressed against barriers, shouting encouragement and warnings in equal measure. In the locker room, Marcus helped Jake into the harness system, checking every connection, every support, every safety mechanism. The equipment transformed Jake's lower body into something almost bionic. Rigid supports hidden under traditional riding chaps and a reinforced shirt. Tommy Chun ran through the game plan one final time, breaking Thunder, Des patterns down into a sequence of responses and counter-responses that sounded more like a chess match than a bull ride. In the stock pens, Thunder waited. At 2,000 pounds of muscle and bad attitude, the bull looked even more intimidating than Jake remembered. Thunder's black coat gleamed under the arena lights, and those dark eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. Sarah had told Jake that bulls like Thunder possessed remarkable memory. The animal might remember Jake, might remember throwing him, might even recognize him as the rider who'd been injured. Whether that would make Thunder more or less aggressive was impossible to predict. Jake watched the bull paw at the ground, sending up puffs of dust, and felt fear trying to crack his resolve. The arena filled with 18,000 spectators, the largest crowd in the venue's history. Television crews broadcast live to millions more. The announcer's voice echoed through the space, building the moment into something mythical. The paralyzed cowboy versus the unbeaten bull. The battle between human determination and natural force. The ride that would either save a family's legacy or end in tragedy that everyone would witness in real time. Elena and Sarah sat in the front row, holding hands so tightly their knuckles turned white, praying to whatever forces might be listening. Jake positioned himself above Thunder's pen, and the crew helped lower him onto the bull's back. The moment his weight settled onto Thunder, Jake felt the animal's power through the harness system. Thunder shifted, testing this new weight, perhaps sensing something different about this rider. Jake wrapped his hand into the bull rope, the modified grip that Marcus had designed specifically for his needs. He took 3 deep breaths, settling his mind into the focused state that Tommy had drilled into him. 8 seconds. Just 8 seconds between everything and nothing. He nodded his head. The gate exploded open. Thunder launched out of the chute like a freight train, and Jake's world compressed into pure sensation. The bull went into his signature right spin, exactly as Sarah's analysis had predicted, and Jake leaned into it, his upper body compensating for his locked lower body, the harness system doing its job. 2 seconds gone. Thunder reversed, a violent snap to the left that would have thrown most riders. But Jake had prepared for this, his free arm high, his core engaged despite the paralysis, the mechanical support keeping his legs positioned perfectly. 4 seconds. Halfway there. The crowd was screaming, but Jake heard nothing except his own heartbeat, and Tommy's voice in his memory. The bull always tries to throw you forward in second 5. Lean back. Trust the equipment. Second 5 arrived like a thunderbolt. Thunder dropped his head and kicked skyward with a force that felt like the earth exploding. The harness system absorbed the impact, the hydraulic dampers doing their job. But Jake felt something shift in his back, a deep wrongness that sent alarm signals racing through his nervous system. Pain bloomed white-hot where he shouldn't be able to feel anything, and some distant part of his mind recognized this as a very bad sign. But he held on. 6 seconds. The bull spun again, combining movements in ways that seemed to violate physics, and Jake's grip started to slip. The rope was cutting into his hand. His shoulder screamed. 7 seconds. Thunder twisted one last time, a final desperate attempt to dislodge this rider who refused to fall. The buzzer sounded. 8 seconds. Jake had done it. He'd ridden Thunder. Then, everything went wrong. Thunder, perhaps frustrated by failing to throw this rider, made one more violent buck. The movement caught Jake off guard in his moment of triumph, and his grip failed. He flew off Thunder's back, the quick-release mechanism separating him from the bull rope, and Jake was airborne. Time stretched. He watched the arena lights spin. He saw Elena's face in the crowd, frozen in horror. He thought about his father, about his grandfather, about all the Morrisons who'd sacrificed everything for this land. Then he hit the ground. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Bullfighters swarmed in, diverting Thunder away from Jake's motionless form. Medical personnel rushed to his side. The crowd had gone silent, 18,000 people holding their breath. Jake lay still, staring up at the ceiling, running through a mental checklist. His arms responded. His hands could move. But that pain in his back had intensified into something enormous. He tried to wiggle his toes, a pointless reflex for someone already paralyzed, but something felt different. Wrong different or right different, he couldn't tell. Dr. Gutierrez reached him first, her hands checking vitals, her voice urgent but controlled. She was asking questions, testing responses, examining him with practiced efficiency. Jake tried to tell her that he'd made the 8 seconds, that they'd won, but his voice wouldn't work. The arena medical team loaded him onto a backboard, stabilized his neck, and began moving him toward the ambulance entrance. As they wheeled him past the front row, Jake caught Elena's eye. She was crying, but she was smiling too, holding up her phone, showing him something. The scoreboard. Official time, 8.3 seconds. Qualified ride, $100,000 prize. The ranch was saved. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of hospitals, tests, and consultations. The pain Jake had felt during the ride turned out to be compressed nerve damage from the impact. Paradoxically, the injury had actually reduced some of the spinal swelling that had caused his paralysis. Dr. Gutierrez explained that sometimes trauma to an injury site could trigger healing responses that conventional treatment could not achieve. She was cautiously optimistic that with intensive therapy, Jake might recover some sensation and possibly some mobility in his legs. It would take years. It might not work. But there was hope where none had existed before. The Morrison Ranch survived. Jake's wings paid off the bank, covered his medical expenses, and left enough to upgrade their operation. Sarah quit her clinic job and returned full-time to implement her modernization plans. Elena finally allowed herself to rest, to grieve properly for her husband, to feel joy instead of constant anxiety. The ranch would continue, the Morrison name would endure, and the land would pass to another generation. Jake spent 6 months in intensive rehabilitation, and slowly, impossibly, feeling began returning to his legs. It started as phantom sensations, then progressed to real nerve responses. His toes moved, then his ankles. Then, on a Tuesday morning 9 months after riding Thunder, Jake Morrison stood up. He needed crutches. His gait was awkward. He tired quickly, but he was walking. The doctors called it a miracle. Jake called it stubbornness. Tommy Chun called him the toughest son of a gun who ever lived. Thunder, for his part, retired from the rodeo circuit after finally being ridden, his legend secure. Standing on the ranch porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the Texas hills gold and crimson, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. He'd lost his ability to walk, then fought to get it back. He'd lost his family's ranch, then risked everything to save it. He'd faced the bull that broke him and conquered it. The scars remained, physical and emotional. But scars were just proof that you'd survived something that tried to kill you. The Morrison Ranch would stand for another generation, and someday, Jake hoped to pass it to children who would understand that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to climb back on, even when every rational voice said to stay down.